Hey everyone, this is Kevin at Tree of Life Nursery. Thank you again for joining us for another virtual workshop. In this workshop, we have our good friend and colleague, Colin Dunleavy of Liveforever Landscapes, and he's going to detail fall bloomers and those plants and how they are cared and maintained in the garden. So without further ado, let's give it to Colin. Hi, welcome everybody. My name's Colin. I am with a company called Liveforever Landscape. I deal with predominantly California native plant landscapes from design, install, and maintenance practices. Today we're going to cover fall blooming plants. In fall time, it can be a bit overwhelming, especially if you already have an established landscape. We deal with things from it's the time of the year where you want to go through and do pruning, open things up as it cools off from the summer season. Summer is just a great time to kind of enjoy the landscape, relax a little bit, do minimal work. And then when we come into fall, we got a lot coming up as far as planting and maintenance practices. But it's a great time to start to really think about during summer what you want to do in the fall time. As far as your landscapes are concerned, it's also a great time to start your installations of new landscapes. With the fall color, we're going to cover various things from trees to shrubs, and then a few of the practices you can do in your landscape during these times. Our first plant, one of the best, my favorite is California buckwheat. You can basically use this plant for almost any situations, from slopes to small planting beds to, just about everywhere. From all the way to coastal areas into more inland locations. There's a lot of different varieties of buckwheat. I'm not going to be able to cover them all, but most of them are about the same as far as care practices and as far as how strong they are in the landscape. And they are a very important pollinator source throughout the summer, starting in spring, summer, and well into fall, even as in the photo, when the flowers turn into rust colors. It's still an important pollinator plant, and it holds a lot of insects and birds. It provides a lot for them throughout the year. In fall time, as you really don't see much blooming. Here it is in a slope. It's a fantastic slope plant. This is a variety called Dana Point buckwheat. It's a low-growing prostrate that was actually selected from the Dana Point headlands. It makes a nice, if you want California buckwheat, but you want something that's a little bit more compact, this one works really well. We do have this on a slope that was planted about 2 years ago. This used to be a lawn, and we converted it all to California native plants, a mix of a few plants from Baja to provide different seasonal color, and then a few from even the Sonoran Desert. This is located in San Clemente, and it's about 8 miles off the coast, so you can really get a lot of diverse plant palettes out in this area. St. Catherine's lace buckwheat, Eriogonum giganteum. This is one of the largest buckwheats out there. It is fantastic for even, you can even do somewhat formal hedges with this buckwheat for larger open spaces. And then it's a fantastic slope plant, great for full sun, really beautiful contrast that you'll see from this buckwheat. In the photo, it's a transition of the white flowers into summer. Well, they'll start to develop this rust, and then as they completely transition into the fall time, really beautiful. It's one of my favorite parts of the season is watching the buckwheats transition, and as you can see, they do provide a lot for the pollinators, butterflies, all sorts of different bees. They're basically like landing pads for native insects. So a really important plant for the landscape. California fuchsia, Epilobium canum. This is by far one of the best, most predominant fall bloomers that you'll get out of California native plants. Especially from local areas from San Juan Capistrano to the coast and in Orange County, and you'll see these grow throughout California. With this plant, it's a hummingbird favorite. Plants with the tubular flowers are very important for hummingbirds. I've even seen plenty of bees provided on this flowering stalk. This is located in a small planting bed from the photo, and with Epilobium, they can grow pretty large with the straight species. They can get a bit weedy over time, about 3 by 3 plus feet. And what you want to do with the straight species California fuchsia is after about a year in the ground or so, or even 2 years, if they become a little bit too much, they can also seed and develop in the landscape, which is good if you have space, but they can be controlled very easily. But after about a year or two in the landscape, you can cut this plant back to about 3 inches to just rejuvenate it, and then it will develop again and start over. In the photo is a subspecies of Epilobium canum called Epilobium canum subspecies canum, and I like this one because it's a little bit more of a prostrate form. I rarely do any pruning to this. I just kind of let it be, and then it will continue its cycles. It is spreading, so it will fill out the spaces, so it's really cool for narrow beds and things like that too, but it won't become overwhelming in the landscape. It's a fantastic plant, really important for the fall season. Coastal golden bush. This is another true fall bloomer that you'll only see develop as late summer approaches and into fall. With this plant, it's important to use this in spots that you have the space for it, because it will reseed. It will show up in places throughout the landscape, but it's controllable. What I like to do with them is I'll let them go, and I'll let them provide their fall blooms, and they'll carry a lot of insects, a lot of wildlife habitat, and after they finish, I can either choose to remove them or just let them develop in places in the landscape where I want them to develop, or just cut them back to the ground and let them start over, or you can leave them if you prefer that. But this plant can really tolerate a lot, and it's a really cool plant when most of the time they'll just show up in well-developed landscapes. If you plant a few, I would really stick to utilizing them in open spaces, things like slopes. They work really well and allow them to do their job in the landscape by basically reseeding and helping with erosion control and things like that throughout the landscape. Seaside heliotrope. This is from coastal California. You'll see it growing to intermediate areas. It is a very strong fall bloomer. It's a small shrub. You want to use it as a filler in the landscape. You hardly ever really see it used in landscape conditions, or even really provided from nurseries, but if you do come upon them, it's a great plant to have. It's really important for butterflies. It's up there with milkweeds and things like that as far as providing nectar for butterflies. And what's important about this plant is the nectar actually contains alkaloids, making butterflies distasteful to predators. So if you want to include this in your butterfly garden, a fall bloomer, something to provide for butterflies throughout the fall, Seaside heliotrope is an important plant. Apache plume. This is a monotypic genus. It's the only plant in Fuchsia paradoxus, the only plant that exists of its kind, and it's one of my favorite summer bloomers. It will start in spring and it will carry into fall. The plant starts out with it's in the rose family. It starts out with a small rose-shaped white flower, and then it produces this gorgeous plume afterwards. And those flowers will carry all the way through into fall, and then just provide layers and layers. They are from our desert regions in California, and so they work well in hotter microclimates. You can get away with planting them on the coast. In certain microclimates that there's more heat, up against a wall of a house and in a place that's full sun in a small planting bed, you want to provide space for them. They can get about anywhere from 4 by 4 feet plus, but they do tolerate pruning very well. In the winter time, they'll become semi-deciduous, and that's really when you want to go in and you can either shape them up or prune them out by like half, and then to rejuvenate them and let them pick back up. But it's definitely a showstopper during the summer and fall months. Really cool plant to use, and just one of the most interesting plants to watch. All right, and then as we approach into fall with Toyon, heteromeles are beautifolia, you'll start to see the flowers produce. This is a great plant in the landscape. It can be used in many situations, provided with a little bit of pruning and maintenance. It can be pruned out and developed into small trees, or it can be left as large shrubs. A very important plant for birds, as well as even butterflies with the flower. But this one, I think everybody knows it for is for its berries that it will produce later in winter, and then even a little bit into well into spring too. And then about that point, you'll basically see this plant and its berries become very empty when the birds come through with things like what are they? Cedar waxwings. Yeah. When the flocks of cedar waxwings come in, and they'll pick every berry off of this plant. This is on the coast, immediate coast in San Clemente, and with these Toyons here, we actually use them as a privacy hedge, and they're fantastic. They work really well. I've even talked to people on this property from well across the canyon, and they can't see into this courtyard where there's a beautiful pool and things like that, and it's just fantastic. They're very easy to care for. The only things with Toyons is typically when you do any pruning with Toyons, you want to wait until winter time. The plant can become susceptible to fire blight. In that situation, I will co-piece this plant down to the ground, and then usually if they're not completely overtaken by the fire blight or disease and they haven't died completely, they'll resprout from the base. Or if you just want to rejuvenate the plant, you can do the same. But as far as pruning, they're very easy. You can open them up. You can open them up basically throughout the year if you're not going to do anything too heavy. That is the rule of thumb with most pruning, is if you're going to do anything really heavy to the plant, wait until you get into the cooler months of fall. But otherwise, you can maintain things throughout the year. Mountain mahogany, Cercocarpus betuloides. This is another showstopper for the fall season. I don't see this plant used enough in the landscape. One of the reasons might be because it is a large shrub. They will get about 10 by 10 feet plus, and they do like to seed. They will move around. They can be controlled. They can be used if you're a little bit more artistic with your pruning, and you can use them really nicely as informal hedges. They're a beautiful evergreen shrub. My favorite place to go see them is up in the Saddleback Mountains. If you go up into the foothills, that's in fall time, you're gonna see them light up during that area. The plumes that they produce after the flower is what's really showy on this plant, and as you can see, they're covered with them. They're a gorgeous plant. With your practices as far as pruning this plant in the landscape, you can open them up into smaller trees, but you have to keep in mind with plants that produce a lot of water sprouts, the more you kind of remove those water sprouts and keep it into a single trunk tree as opposed to a multi-branch tree, it's going to weaken the plant. So you want to keep that in mind and just allow yourself to have space if you're going to use this plant in the landscape. Great for slopes. It is, because it is from more of the foothills of California, you do want to, I don't really plant this one directly on the coast, more intermediate to inland properties. It's a good plant for. In the landscape, it does prefer full sun, and its watering requirements are from infrequent to occasional. Once established, maybe about once every month at the most to once every 3 months on this plant. So keep that in mind with planting it, and provide space. All right, with fall color in California, big leaf maple is one that really shows that and provides that in the landscape. We do have quite a few large riparian trees that are warm season trees that you can actually get away with planting throughout the year. Big leaf maple, for example, when you're planting this one in the landscape, it does take pretty regular water in the beginning to keep it going, to keep it alive, to provide growth for the plant. And as it becomes more established, you can cut back on that water, and it can become very moderate in the landscape. It is a large tree. It can be artfully pruned. It can be kept. Same as sycamores, it won't get as big as a sycamore. So if you wanted something to provide that kind of fall color as a sycamore would, but you don't have as much space for it, big leaf maple is a great plant. Like with most deciduous trees, you want to wait until winter time when it drops its leaves to prune it out and open it up, and just give it time to grow initially. At the end of fall, it will provide a beautiful yellow golden color in the landscape before it drops its leaves. And with most deciduous trees, they're fantastic in the landscape because that leaf litter is going to provide a gorgeous mulch and color on the ground. And with that said, with the leaf litter, that does provide a lot of habitat. It does provide habitat, it does provide nutrients for the soil. So allow your leaf litter to drop on the ground, allow it to decompose, allow it to act like a natural mulch. In older landscapes, when these larger trees start to develop, you really won't have to mulch and constantly upkeep and maintain in those situations. You can utilize the plants themselves in larger landscapes. Covering some of the leaf litter mulch, on this photo we have a California chorus frog, and this is another deciduous large tree called white alder. Beautiful examples of these trees you can see in Black Star Canyon if you hike up that way. Very large tree. You do need to have an area that they can be utilized well and provide space for. And with a lot of these riparian plants, these larger trees, riparian trees, is because they're warm season plants, you can plant them. You might want to wait until spring, but because they're developing their growth, you can actually plant them throughout the year. You just have to provide the water for them. With big leaf maple, you want to provide water for it adequately, and same with sycamores for the first few years of the plant until they become well established. And then maybe after that certain point, after the 2-3 year point, they can go pretty moderate and stay on the same lines as the other plants in the landscape. Gambilia, Juncia, Grand Canyon. We do have a few snapdragon plants growing throughout the Channel Islands as well into Baja, California. And with our Channel Island plants and Baja plants, this is where you can really provide an expansion of a color in the landscape. With these plants, very important for hummingbirds. Hummingbird wars do go on where I have these planted in mass areas. It's a very easy plant to maintain. There's a few different varieties of Gambilia, ranging from ground covers to shrubs that will get to about 4 by 4 feet. They're very easy to maintain in the landscape. With the Baja bush snapdragon, if it gets too leggy after years of growth, you can cut them back in the winter time and just rejuvenate them and let them start over. Smart aster or California aster, if you're looking for a ground cover for the landscape, This is a beautiful one. It's also a gorgeous late summer to fall bloomer. Really beautiful contrast in this plant with the purple flowers, very important for butterflies. There's a few different species that you'll come across, and just the growth varies very slightly. Silver carpet hugs to the ground a little bit more, and some of the other varieties can become a little bit more sprawling, but they all work very well as a ground cover. And the contrast in the leaf itself, it provides really beautiful contrast with, if you're doing other low-growing plants like coyote brush, different low-growing buckwheats. They'll stand out, and it's a fantastic plant for the fall as far as the blooms go. As far as maintenance on this plant, you don't really need to do much. I just let them go through their cycles. With the smart aster, you will see it kind of die back in certain parts of the season. Sometimes in summer, you can cut back the dead growth of the plant and then just let it rejuvenate and grow back. But other than that, very, very little care is needed in this plant. Seaside daisy. This is a coastal plant to more central California, to Monterey area. I do use it a lot in our landscapes in SoCal. It's a very easy plant as far as watering goes. It can tolerate extra water if you give it to that. If you have areas where you have a lot of grasses or even up against a lawn, it makes a very good transitional plant. In the photo is the straight species, and this is actually growing in Pebble Beach, California. It's a sprawling ground cover plant, but there are a few different other varieties like Wayne Roderick and things like that that stay more compact, that only grow out to about 2-3 feet, that won't continue to spread. But if you're looking for a ground cover, very low ground cover, this is a great one for that. And in coastal situations, you can plant it in full sun. If you move it more into intermediate, hotter locations, it makes a great filtered shade to even a little bit heavier shade plant. With this plant, as far as maintenance practices, it's going to provide a lot of flowers, and sometimes you'll see them develop in spring. If it's getting extra water, you'll see it even in summer, and then but they'll really kind of perform in fall. The important thing with this plant is if you prefer to keep it cleaner as far as maintenance goes, you can cut the flowering stalk, and when you cut the flowering stalk down after it finishes, if you don't do that, it might give it a little bit of a porcupine effect. But if you take the stalk all the way down to the ground, the plant will look very clean throughout the year, and you only have to do this several times throughout the year to keep it looking nice. It's a fantastic filler once again, and it does provide a lot of fall color. Indian mallow, not only a fall bloomer, but year-round you can keep a flower going on this. In summer, in hot areas where they're not getting as much water, if they're on very low water frequencies, you won't see them bloom as much. But with a little bit of extra water, they will bloom throughout the year. It's a very important plant for native bees. You'll always see a bee coming up to this plant, especially during windy days. Things like our different mallows, you want to look inside of them. You'll see a bee taking a nap or taking shelter in one of these plants. Very adaptable plant too. They do grow in inland full sun locations, but you can bring them up pretty close to the coast, especially in different microclimates where it creates a little bit more heat. I've had them to San Clemente, to the immediate close in certain areas, and in Corona del Mar, and they work fantastic. With this plant, the maintenance is very easy. As far as if you want to keep the bloom going a little bit longer, you can deadhead the old flowering stalks to keep that going. You can, if you have them in a narrow bed like it is in this photo, you can shape them out. And the plant, it's just, and you can do that throughout the year. Other than that, you don't really have to do much care to this plant. The only thing you want to be mindful is that it is frost tolerant. So in areas of frost, be careful with it. You know, if you have an area of frost, plant it up against a house, somewhere that will keep it warmer in a smaller space like that, and in smaller beds with cement, and that microclimate will keep it warm throughout the year. Okay, Baja fairy duster. This is pulling another plant from Baja, California. Another special plant that does provide a long bloom almost year round. This is a frost tolerant plant as well. You want to be mindful with that. Other than that, you can pretty much plant this anywhere from coastal areas to inland locations. Full sun is great for this plant. It will bloom throughout the year unless you do have frost, where you'll see it kind of slow down a little bit. The rest of the year, it provides more food than any hummingbird feeder. This is outside my window at my house, and I do not have any hummingbird feeders throughout the house. I just look at this plant throughout the year, and not only hummingbirds, but blue butterflies. It's a host plant for blue butterflies. You'll see all sorts of insects on this plant. Just a gorgeous plant, very easy to maintain, very easy to shape up for narrow beds, or if you're dealing with planting it in slopes and larger spaces, you can let them sprawl out. Over time, what's nice about these two is they will seed themselves, and then they will kind of develop mass planting areas, and they're a gorgeous pop of color during spring, fall, and summer as well. What I really like about this plant is it tolerates just about any pruning you can do to it. So in smaller locations, you can open them up quite nicely. I've even had situations where we'll have mass plants of them, and they'll come across a sidewalk or something like that too, and they can be hedged out, and they tolerate it fantastic. So it's a great plant. The only issue with this plant is getting them started. When they are young, if you're dealing with a 1 gallon plant, they are pretty susceptible to getting eaten back. So you can either provide a cage or use a safe repellent for the plant until it becomes more established and starts to develop. Once they start to develop, they grow very quickly. In about a year to 2, they'll probably already succeed about 4 feet and taller. Just an excellent plant pulling from Baja once again, and these will just provide a longer blooming season in your native garden. Okay, and I wanted to throw in a few of our evergreen shrubs that you can actually utilize in more difficult situations in the landscape. One of the greatest is being lemonade berry. This is one of those plants that tolerates a lot of pruning, that tolerates pruning throughout the year. That's very easy for most landscapers to not kill this plant because of that. As you can see in this situation where it's located, it provides a really beautiful hedge, a tall hedge. You can let them go up to about 15 feet high. So it is going to provide shade. It's going to provide a privacy screen. And it's also very easy to maintain. Another one that I don't hardly ever see used in the landscape as much as it should be is California copperleaf. I love this plant as in this formal setting. This is a property in Corona del Mar where I utilized it as a low-growing shrub in a mass planting. It's in about a 2-foot bed, and as you can see, it fills out quite well. It's a great replacement for a box hedge or something like that too. And being one of our local California native plants, it's an awesome fit in a California native garden. This plant does have a pretty cool flower. It's almost like a small plume that's in the pinkish color. And then it produces a seed pod after that's a very maroon color. Dark evergreen leaf on the shrub. Just looks great throughout the year, and very minimal pruning if you wanted to keep it to shape, but otherwise you can let them go, and they provide a great informal hedge. All right, and don't forget about year-round interest that grasses will provide. We do have an amazing selection of grasses from California. In this slide, we're actually looking at, this is a percolation pit, and this was basically constructed to filter. It's in a property in Corona del Mar, and it was used to filter any water runoff, any drainage from the whole house property into this percolation pit to allow it to percolate before entering into the ocean. They initially thought that they couldn't do much with this location, and and I came up with this idea to provide a dry riverbed and a royal influenced rock garden. And one of the main grasses that you can see, there's a few others with the California native plants, but the highlights in this is basket rush. Basket rush is a really beautiful ornamental grass, but you have to use it in a correct spot because they can spread quite a bit over time. They can become very large. So in this situation, we have it very controlled, it being kept more compact, placed up against boulders in more narrow spots. And this photo was actually taken in midsummer where the yarrows are in full bloom. And as you can see, it's just a very showy plant, and it became one of the highlights of this landscape. And the whole other locations of the landscape, there's quite a few other native grasses used, from Canyon Prince wild rye to even Mendocino reed grass beyond. So we do have quite a few native grasses that can be utilized in the landscape. On this slide is a great example of Canyon Prince wild rye. We do have a mainland wild rye that gets much larger. If you want something more formal looking, a little bit cleaner, a little bit more compact, Canyon Prince is a great choice. With most of the California native grasses, they're very easy to maintain. You know, occasionally if they get too leggy or if they just kind of get too full or too large, they can be pruned. They can be pruned throughout the year. With certain grasses, if you want to rejuvenate and start them over, you can cut them down to the ground and they will sprout back. And you know, that's after maybe the 3-year mark on certain grasses after initial planting, and they tolerate it well. They're used to situations where they get eaten back in the wild and things like that. The last grass I want to cover, and this is another really cool display of more evergreen native plants. In the forefront, we have island green Dudleya. This is one of the Channel Island varieties of Dudleya. Another gorgeous plant. It provides a really beautiful contrast up against this. Behind that, I have a Ceanothus, a Yankee Point, and this is a ground cover Ceanothus. And with this plant, even when it's not in bloom, they put in spectacular blooms in the springtime, but throughout the rest of the year, it's a beautiful evergreen leaf that they provide. And then right behind that is deergrass, and deergrass is just starting right now to develop its flowering stalks, and it's a gorgeous grass. And they're really great for transitional locations in the landscape, areas that you have a lawn, you have a meadow, you have places that provide more water, you have a dry riverbed, a creek. That's where you can utilize these grasses. They do adapt very well too to more moderate settings as well as far as watering. Manzanita is just another great year-round plant in the landscape. As we get into fall, this is the ideal time to plant manzanitas because they are susceptible to pathogens during the summer from being overwatered. It's ideal to plant these in the fall time and utilize the cool season and utilize hopefully any rain that we get to help encourage this plant and get it established before summer. In this photo is one of the ground cover varieties, and this photo was taken last year in October, so it is a fairly early bloomer. It's Arctostaphylos cruzensis, and this one ranges from coastal areas in Monterey. We do have numerous varieties of manzanitas. You can find one for almost any location in the landscape, ranging from ground covers to small trees like big berry manzanita. Their bloom seasons tend to stay. Some of them will fall into late fall, and it's very important too because of that, because it provides this whole window that's missed for native bee species to provide a pollen for them. And then other plants will bloom into winter and then early spring, and then they do produce a berry afterwards. But it's an excellent choice for the landscape. With this plant, it's in a shadier location, and we do have it growing with some plants that actually tolerate more water, like Erigeron, Festuca, Patrick's Point, and even yarrow. And it works really well because it's not an overly hot location in this microclimate. Where in other locations with Manzanitas, if you're dealing with heavy clay soils, you do want to provide mounds for them, or stick to a plant that's a little bit easier to grow, like Howard McMahon. This photo was taken last year in October. This is a very narrow bed where this is planted in. It's a hollyleaf cherry. It's the large shrub to small tree, and underneath the hollyleaf cherry is a coffeeberry. Two fantastic evergreen shrubs, look consistent throughout the year. Both of them do bloom in springtime, and then as the cherry says, and then the coffeeberry, they provide berries after, and they can be utilized for different things. They are edible. But for me, I like to use them in formal settings. Another one that is underutilized in formal settings and in small spaces with hollyleaf cherry, it's fantastic because much like Rhus integrifolia, it tolerates a lot of pruning and shaping. They can also be used as narrow hedges or be pruned into small trees. And you can get away with pruning this throughout the year. And for heavier pruning, I wait until we get into the fall season. In this area, we utilized it into a tree form to provide shade. In this bed, it's only about a 3 foot to 3.5 feet wide planting bed. And there's a wall behind it, and they work fantastic. You can keep them pruned out fairly narrow with both the plants, and you can shape them up as needed. And with these plants, at this point, they only get pruned out about once a year to keep the shape. It's another important one for nesting birds, for all sorts of different birds, and when it's blooming, all sorts of different insects. Even with the coffeeberry, you'll see tons of pollinators attracted to this plant while it's blooming. Okay, so thank you for joining this YouTube class, and I hope that this provides information for you when it comes to fall interest in the landscape. Remember to have fun with your planting, to try different things, to not be afraid if you lose a plant, because it happens. And really, it will teach you patience in these landscapes, and you're going to enjoy all the benefits that come with it.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button below. Subscribe to the channel for more videos that will be coming up. And please share this video with your friends and help get the word out on how to care and maintain a lot of these native plants. We are still open to the public, so if you'd like to join us here at the nursery in our nice, beautiful, open setting, you're more than welcome to. Come down. We are open Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. If you would like curbside pickup, that you can call ahead and we can set up an order for you. All right, until next time, everyone, thank you for joining.